Hello everyone, here at OS Reviews. You're watching our video review of the Huawei MediaPad M5. This is the 8.4-inch version, and it also comes in a larger 10-inch version, which is more of the Pro model that also comes with an optional keyboard, but all have the same internal specifications, including the Kirin 960 processor, which is a step below the current flagship from Huawei, which is the 970, found on the P20, P20 Pro, but still is very capable with machine learning capabilities that we'll be discussing later on in this video. It also is coupled with 4 gigs of RAM and 64 gigs of built-in storage. So all of this makes the MediaPad M5 a pretty capable and powerful tablet. In fact, it is one of the few flagship level tablets that we are seeing still coming out here in 2018, because this is a category that's slowly dwindling with Chromebooks getting more and more popular. Huawei has made the entire thing out of a unibody finish, so we have these integrated antenna bands from the bottom as well as on the top that is kind of reminiscent of a larger smartphone. The entire thing has these rounded corners that are extremely ergonomic and easy to hold, comfortable in the hand. The tablet is also very slim, which is quite impressive, and on the right hand side you have access to a SIM card tray that also holds a micro SD card, and on the top here we have a 13 megapixel rear facing camera, but there is no LED flash, so it's going to struggle a bit more in darker environments, even though cameras on tablets have traditionally not been as powerful or good as on smartphones, of course. On the side here, there's also a dedicated volume rocker along with a power key, and you have speakers on the top as well as speakers on the bottom, and that's because audio is another point of highlight for the MediaPad M5, and this is actually high-res certified, so it's a pretty good audio consumption experience, especially if you plug in headphones. With that being said, there is unfortunately no standard 3.5mm jack on the MediaPad M5, just like on many of Huawei's newer smartphones. It comes with a Type-C to 3.5mm adapter, but if you don't want to use that, you probably have to opt for Type-C style headphones, or you probably have to get a Bluetooth headset. Up front, we have the aforementioned 8.4-inch display, making it a pretty portable overall size, and it's also a 2K or Quad HD resolution, making it very pixel dense, but it is a traditional LCD IPS panel as opposed to being OLED or AMOLED. There's also access to a 5 megapixel front-facing camera for selfies and video chatting. There's the Huawei logo, and on the bottom there's also a fingerprint scanner. Underneath, we also have a 5,100 mAh capacity battery. That's a pretty good size for this 8-inch tablet and allows it to be used for over 2 days, 3 days comfortably, or sometimes even as long as a week if you are using it very lightly. So battery life is another highlight. Alright, so turning the tablet on, immediately we are greeted to EMUI, or Emotion UI, and that's Huawei's proprietary skin on top of Android 8.0 Oreo. It's a overall experience that we've seen already on the Huawei Mate 10 Pro, and overall, even though it has a slight iOS-inspired look, I think that it's a pretty intuitive user experience that also gives you a good amount of customization if you want to dig a little bit deeper. So there isn't really any optimizations that the company has made to EMUI that sets it apart from the smartphone version, so you'll be very familiar if you've used a Huawei phone in the past 2-3 years. The lock screen here comprises of a moving wallpaper that will change every time you turn on the display, and you also have notifications as they pop along. Down below, you can access the camera very quickly or swipe up to have access to some quick commands, including the calculator, as well as a QR code scanner. The fingerprint scanner is also insanely fast on the MediaPad M5, just like on the P20 and the Mate 10 Pro. It's definitely another highlight here. Alright, so taking a quick look at the user interface, again, very similar. We have access to just unlimited pages that we can populate with our favorite applications, and there is access to a drawer, at least in the US version of the tablet here, that gives you a list format for all your apps, similar to stock Android. We have all the traditional gestures like a drag down for EMUI to have a universal search. I can also tap here to have a barcode scan if I'm downloading an app, and on the left we also have the kind of Google Now page that will collect various news feeds as they populate, so you can tap on them for an easy reader-like view. Overall, the user interface is smooth, it's responsive and fluid, as expected from a device powered by the Kirin 960, which, even though it's a year old now, is still an extremely capable processor. It still is easily comparable to the likes of a Snapdragon 820 or 821, for instance, and for an Android tablet in 2018, it's already one of the most powerful models that you can currently pick up, especially as competitors like Samsung haven't released their versions of an Android tablet in quite some time now. Huawei does still give us all the standard Google apps, including the access to YouTube, Maps, Google Photos, Drive, as well as the Play Store. And of course, they've downloaded some of their own apps as well, including their version of different utility services, as well as Quick is pre-installed. That's a video editing tool that we also quite liked on the Mate 10 Pro. And this also comes preloaded with a selection of Microsoft apps for productivity, including Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and Outlook, which allows you to get some work done when on the go. And it's a very good idea because the larger size of this tablet makes it a lot easier to type, as well as view back presentations, things like that. Under top apps, you also see some social media apps like Instagram, Messenger, Booking.com, all preloaded, and this is classified as quote-unquote bloatware, but luckily you can uninstall many of these programs if you don't really like it. About 10 gigs of the built-in 64 gigs of storage is taken up by the apps and operating system right out of the box, which is about the same again as what we saw on the Mate 10 Pro, and luckily you can expand on the memory with a micro SD card on this particular model. Alright, so let's dive into some of the features, and let's begin with the camera. At 13 megapixels, it's a pretty decent resolution on paper, at least, for a tablet. With that being said, it's definitely no match for the Leica optics that Huawei is using on their premium flagships at the moment. And despite having an obvious hump or protrusion on the back, again, I would say that the camera quality is good, probably actually very good for a tablet, but compared to a top-of-the-line smartphone, it's noticeably inferior. Still, the interface is clean and the same as what we saw before on the other Huawei phones we've checked out recently. It allows us to tap to focus, and I can also swipe from the left to bring up additional settings, including HDR, night shot, light painting, which will capture the streams of a light when it's moving in the dark, and there's also different filters that you can apply, and of course I can change the resolution swiping over to the right. So it's a very intuitive UI that actually works quite well. And you're also able to record video up to 4K resolution, which is quite impressive. And there are stereo microphones on board, which makes it pretty nice in terms of audio recording capabilities as well. Here are a few samples, and this was captured as the skies were getting a little darker around 8 p.m. or so, but you can tell how it's capturing a good amount of detail in these trees, and it also works quite well for things like document scanning. And two more samples here. You can tell again some of the highlights are overexposed near the window here, but as a whole colors are actually pretty sharp, and again the display is of course excellent. With that 2K resolution or Quad HD, it's one of the highest resolutions that you'll be able to find on an Android tablet these days, and the very wide viewing angles combined with the sharp and pretty accurately calibrated colors are another plus. And of course EMUI also gives you the ability to go into settings and change the color profile of the display if you want to tweak it to your liking. So next we can take a quick look at the audio quality and the video playback by launching into YouTube. Audio quality is definitely excellent on the MediaPad M5. In fact, it was already really good on the M3, but Huawei claims that it was even improved upon on this newer generation of their flagship tablet, making it significantly louder. The stereo speakers on here are very immersive, they get quite loud, and there's also surprising depth. So if you're listening to EDM or action films, there's actually a bit of the bass that you can hear, and interestingly, you can feel it as well. It's strange because the tablet is made out of a pretty durable aluminum, but it still almost kind of vibrates when it's blasting out music, similar to the Mate 10 Pro, where I thought it was interesting. It's almost like the back plate resonates as you hold the device in your hand. Before we dive into a look at the web browsing capability, I also want to point out that the fingerprint scanner has a few gestures that you can use it for. For instance, I can tap once to go back. So for instance, if I tap once, it just takes me back, and I can long hold to go back into the main home screen. Furthermore, you're able to swipe either left or right to open up your previously and current open applications for easy multitasking. So there's some advanced tricks that you can use the key here, which is actually a nice little extra feature from Huawei. So taking a look at web browsing next, we are taking a look at the New York Times. In fact, let's try reloading this page. It's a good benchmark because it's a complex site with many ads as well as scrolling elements, which can be difficult for less powerful hardware to run. But you can tell that how on the Kirin 960 coupled with 4 gigs of RAM, it's really no problem at all. Web browsing is buttery smooth, even right now when we have over 5 tabs open, as well as a handful of apps in the background, and everything remains fully interactive, including videos as well as photos. Because the screen resolution is really so high, you have no problems at all reading even smaller text, even on an 8-inch tablet compared to something like a 10-inch tablet, for instance. So web browsing is a joy. Although things like performance and UI, again, are very similar to what we've been seeing from Huawei smartphones, the only difference that I can really detect is under certain utilities and in things like the settings, we have a split screen view by default versus on a phone where we only have, let's say, this main page and you have to tap to take a look at additional settings. On this, they know that the screen size is a little larger, so just like on an Apple iPad, we can see a bit more content. Otherwise, if we exit out of this, we can also swipe up to access Google Assistant, so the AI assistant is still here as well without any problems. And again, we have a handful of apps open right now, but the performance is still remaining very smooth and responsive. There are a few machine learning capabilities, and although it's not quite as smart in terms of having AI scene recognition in the camera, which again, it's not a photography-centric device, it's more of a media consumption device, under the photo gallery, you can still see your photos sorted depending on what it classifies and recognizes the object as. So for instance, it's grouped together all the landscape shots into one folder automatically, and in similar fashion, it's also grouped together all the food shots under one folder. So it does a little bit of sorting by itself, which can be helpful. Perhaps without too many surprises, the gaming ability of the tablet is very strong thanks to the powerful Kirin 960 chipset coupled with 4 gigs of RAM. You're able to play all the latest titles as well as 3D games without any slowdowns or any drop frames for that matter either. And the overall temperature of the tablet also remains pretty cool even as you are gaming. It gets a little bit warm if you are, let's say, using the camera and then switching over to gaming for a few hours at the same time, but it never gets hot, and it's a nice thing to note that it never really thermally throttles thanks to the in-house chipset. So that's the Huawei MediaPad M5, and it's a very aptly named tablet because it's excellent when it comes to media consumption, with a beautiful display, with a super sensitive screen that supports 10 fingers for multi-touch, with gently curved corners, amazing ergonomics, as well as a super premium build quality, excellent audio quality, as well as overall performance. It's hard to fault the overall performance of this tablet, especially for things like streaming, as well as gaming and web browsing. With that being said, the biggest question now is whether a premium Android tablet is still justifiable in 2018, as our phones are getting larger and larger with their displays, as well as Chromebooks getting more and more powerful. However, even with a dwindling list of newer Android tablets coming out, I still personally really like the MediaPad M5 just because it presents an interesting alternative to the iPad mini. So if you are looking for a relatively small, compact tablet that can be a good mix between things like productivity as well as for media consumption, then this is definitely one that you should consider because I would say it's the best 8-inch tablet, Android tablet that is on the market right now, which is, again, not a very crowded space to be in, but nonetheless, Huawei has definitely impressed me with their build as well as their audio quality on this device. You can check out more details about the MediaPad M5 down in the description box below, but for now, this has been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. This has been the Huawei MediaPad M5 8.4-inch Android.